Hi guys, it's time for another World of Tanks tutorial with me, Antonow too. Actually today this is our 9th tutorial I think, so we're getting on pretty quickly. Our last tutorial was about crew skills and perks, so obviously today we're going to talk about equipment as I already announced in my last tutorial. And this tutorial won't be quite as long as the last one I hope, because equipment, there isn't all that much to say to equipment. However, equipment is a very important part of the game, and for all you newcomers, please stay tuned because it's important that you know all this. So, equipment, what is equipment? Equipment, pieces of equipment are stuff that you can fit to your tank for quite a bunch of money, which will improve your the combat abilities of your crew and your tank. So basically just improve your in-game performance a bit. However, as I said, they're very costly. And there are basically two different kinds of equipment. There's normal equipment and complex equipment. And the difference between those two kinds of equipment are that normal equipment can be demounted for free and put into the depot where you can sell it or put it onto another tank, while complex equipment can't be demounted except if you pay for it with gold. Demounting a piece of complex equipment will cost you 10 gold each. However, you can also destroy a piece of complex equipment. You cannot demount complex equipment for free. So that's the difference. And there are only very few pieces of normal equipment and there are a lot of pieces of complex equipment. There are actually only 3 pieces of normal equipment, which are toolbox, binocular telescope and the camo net. And then all the other pieces of equipment are complex equipment. Now, the way I'll do it in this tutorial, pretty similar to the crew skills tutorial, is I'm just going to quickly tour you through each piece of equipment, tell you something about it, and yeah, then we'll be done already. So, first of all, I'm going to quickly tell you about the normal equipment, because there are only 3 pieces of normal equipment, being toolbox, binocular telescope, and camo net. So, we'll start off with toolbox. And what toolbox does is it adds 25% to your module repair speed. So if you don't use a repair kit, for example if you're tracked, you obviously don't want to use a repair kit on your tracks because you want to save your repair kit, for example for your ammo rack or your gun, then that will add 25% to the speed with which your crew repairs that module. So that's very useful, especially if you're in brawling frontline tanks, like for example active scouts, brawling medium tanks and brawling heavy tanks. I wouldn't necessarily recommend the toolbox for example RT or tank destroyers or other snipey and stationary tanks, because your tracks won't be blown off all that often. However, for frontline brawlers, toolbox never is a bad idea. Second up, we've got the binocular telescope, or binocs. I'm going to call the binocular telescope binocs from here on, because binocular telescope is a really long word and I hate long words. So binocs, and binocs is a very interesting piece of equipment because it adds 25% to your view range. That's a hell of a lot of view range. However, you can't have more than 500 meters view range, and the maximum view range in the game is 445 meters, except if you've got recon trained on your commander. So you have to watch out, because if 25% of your view range added is more than 445 meters, then that won't count for, and you'll only have 445 meters, not more, except for if you've got recon. But recon doesn't extend your view range all that much. It only extends your view range up to 450 meters, I believe. So you have to figure that out. You can see your view range down here. For example, my Super Pershing has got a view range of 380 meters at the moment. And another important thing to know about binocs is that it only kicks in if you're standing still. So you can only use binocs when stationary. It doesn't work when your tank's on the move. So you should think about that as well. So again, for tanks that are on the move a lot, for brawlers, for fast medium tanks, for active scouts, binocs isn't a good idea. However, if you're for example in a stationary tank destroyer, artillery piece, or a passive scout who sits in bushes and spots enemies like that, binocular telescope is a very good idea, especially for passive scouting. And then last of all, for as far as normal equipment goes, we've got the camo net, or camouflage net, but I call it camo net. And what camo net does, camo net is kind of an anti-binoc, because camo net reduces your visibility 25%. However, again, only if you're stationary. So that means detecting you will be 25% more difficult for enemies if you're standing still. However, again, it takes quite a while for that to kick in, and you have to stand still. So I would only recommend camo net for tank destroyers, for sniping tanks, for artillery and stationary tanks, not for frontline brawlers. So that takes us through the normal equipment, which can be demounted for free, and now we come to the equipment that you have to pay for to demount, the complex equipment. So the first piece of complex equipment we're going to talk through is the vertical stabilizer. And the vertical stabilizer is an amazing piece of equipment, because what it does basically is it increases your accuracy while on the move and while turret rotation 20%. So that's quite nice, because if you're moving and you're trying to hit a target on the move, you're going to be a lot more accurate. However, it doesn't stop there, because what this means as well is that if you are moving and then you stop, your aiming circle will start off 20% smaller, and that means your aiming time will be decreased as well. So vertical stabilizer is one of the best pieces of equipment in the whole game, and I can recommend that for nearly every tank in the game. I wouldn't recommend it for artillery all that much, but for other tanks with bad aiming time, the vertical stabilizer definitely is a very good idea. Then next we've got filled tanks with carbon dioxide, and I wouldn't really recommend that all that much. It increases your fuel tank durability 50%. Not that important really. It's not all that a bad idea on tanks like the IS-4 that have got a whole pile of fuel tanks stuck to their rear. However, even on tanks like the IS-4, I wouldn't really recommend this piece of equipment. Oops, that's the wrong thing down here. Okay, so I can't really recommend this this piece of equipment, not at all. Okay, so then we come to the enhanced gun lane drive, which in turn is a very good piece of equipment. It's kind of a direct competitor to the vertical stabilizer, because what this does is it increases your aiming speed 10%. So usually the vertical stabilizer is better than the enhanced gun lane drive, because the vertical stabilizer lets your aiming circle start off 20% smaller, while the enhanced gun lane drive only increases your aiming speed 10%. So usually you aim faster with a vertical stabilizer, and on top, vertical stabilizer also improves accuracy while moving. So usually you should choose the vertical stabilizer over the enhanced gun lane drive. However, the vertical stabilizer isn't available in every tank, and on tanks in which it isn't available and your aiming time is bad, the gun lane drive can be a good idea, and then you should choose the gun lane drive. However, on some tanks on which the aiming speed is longer than your reload, for example on the ARL 44 or on artillery, for example, although it isn't like that on artillery, but all the same, I can recommend the gun lane drive for tanks like the ARL or artillery. Coated optics is next, and coated optics is pretty similar to binocs. However, the difference is that it only increases your view range 10% instead of 25%. However, the benefit of coated optics is that coated optics works during the whole game. You don't have to stand still, it even works when you're moving, and it's full 10% benefit. So usually coated optics is a better idea if you're not stationary. For example, if you're an active scout or a frontline brawler. Coated optics is definitely important for tanks, for example, like the M48A1 Patton or the T69, which depend on their view range, but also on their maneuverability and mobility. I can definitely recommend coated optics for those tanks, but for more stationary tanks, you should choose binocular telescope. Next, again, we come to one of my favorite pieces of equipment beside vertical stabilizer and improved vents, but I'm getting ahead of myself. We haven't talked through improved vents yet. I'm talking about the tank gun rammer, and the tank gun rammer improves your reload time 10%. And this is an amazing piece of equipment, especially on tanks that have got a bad reload time. You should definitely check this piece of equipment out, because like, for example, if you've got a fighting vehicle 215B183, which is the tier 10 British tank destroyer, it has got a reload time of about 30 seconds, and 10% of 30 seconds are 3 seconds. So that means if you fit a tank gun rammer to your fighting vehicle, that will improve the reload 3 seconds. However, if you, for example, got a tank like the IS-4, which has only got a reload of about 10 seconds, 10% of that will be only 1 second. So that means you get a lot more benefit of it on tanks with long reload times, like, for example, artillery especially, or tank destroyers like the Jagdpanzer E100 or the fighting vehicle 183, than on tanks with a low reload time. So you should think about the reload time of your tank before you mount this. On fast firing medium and rapid firing medium tanks and light tanks, this isn't that good an idea, but on slowly firing tanks, especially heavy tanks, SPGs and tank destroyers, the tank gun rammer is really important. However, you cannot mount the tank gun rammer on autoloader tanks, so like not on a lot of French tanks, the American autoloader tank line, all those tanks, you cannot mount a tank gun rammer. Next, we come to the spore liner, and there are different classes of spore liners. There's the light spore liner, the medium spore liner, the heavy spore liner, and the super heavy spore liner. And it depends on your tank. Like, for example, I've got a LOL tractor in my garage, and you've got a light spore liner there. That will give you 20% benefit. Then I've got you can fit, for example, the medium spore liner on the super Pershing. That will give you 25% benefit. The heavy spore liner, for example, on the IS-4 gives you 30% benefit, and the super heavy spore liner, which you can fit on tanks like, for example, the E100, I believe, will give you a 50% benefit. And this benefit is that it adds to your armor protection against HE shells and ramming. So obviously ramming, everybody knows what that is, but for you new guys who aren't all that familiar to the way HE shells work, HE shells, if they penetrate, they make a hell of a lot of damage, but most HE shells haven't got all that great a penetration. However, HE shells can also damage you when they hit next to your tank, or hit your tank and don't penetrate. And this damage they do then will be decreased or absolutely avoided by adding a spore liner. If your armor is strong enough, it will prevent this splash damage, it's called. But if your armor isn't so strong, and especially artillery, because most artillery pieces fire HE ammo, and for slow tanks that are big artillery targets, you should definitely get a spore liner. And I was thinking about getting a spore liner for my IS-4 as well. However, then I decided for the vertical stabilizer, because it's more important for the to cope with the bad aiming time. But but a spore liner is definitely a good option, especially for heavy tanks that have got problems with RT. So next we've got the enhanced suspension, and there are a whole pile of different names for enhanced suspension. For example, on the Super Pershing it's called enhanced tourism bars, third class. Then let's see, what's it called in the IS-4? It's called fifth class. Type T34, it's called, let's say, enhanced crystalline suspension. So there are a whole pile of different names, but it all does the same. It improves your suspension durability, and it improves your load limit 10%. You can see your load limit up here, beneath your hit points in the statistics. It's not the left number, it's the right number. So for example, my load limit on the Super Pershing is 52.5 tons. And for example, if you fit new heavier modules or you fit equipment weighs too, and you cannot, it surpasses your load limit, then by fitting this enhanced suspension, that will help with that. Also, the enhanced suspension helps with the helps improve the durability of your tracks. That's especially important for tanks like the T50-2 or like all fast scouting tanks, because for example, if you jump over a ridge, often you will have noticed that your tracks rip off. That won't happen so often when you've got the enhanced suspension. It also helps if you, for example, don't want to grind the new tracks in order to fit, for example, your second gun or something like that on a tank. Then you can instead get the enhanced torsion, and that will help. So for all scouts out there and for all people who are too lazy to grind your way up to better tracks in order to bear the load limit, the enhanced suspension is a good idea. However, again, there are other pieces of equipment which are more important. Vertical stabilizer, tank on rammer. Yeah, me being funny again. Okay, next we've got the ammo rack, the wet ammo rack, and that just basically improves your ammo rack durability. So it helps against being ammo racked. It decreases the chance of your ammo rack being blown up or damaged, and that's especially useful on the Leopard row and on all tanks that haven't got any armor and which ammo racks get blown up often. Wet ammo rack is really important on those kind of tanks. On tank destroyers it's important too, but it's especially important on tanks with no armor. And if you notice that the ammo rack for your tank gets blown up often, you should definitely check out the wet ammo rack, because it adds 50% more durability to your ammo rack. And finally, we come to the last. No, I've still got something before after the improved vents, but now we come to improved ventilation. And improved ventilation is beside the medium caliber or beside the tank gun rammer, one of my favorite pieces of equipment, because what improved vents does is it's actually just the same as Brothers in Arms. It does exactly the same as Brothers in Arms. It improves all your crew. It improves your crew's basic specification as well as all your crew's skills and perks 5%. So it will help with your reload time, with your aiming speed, with your acceleration, with your accuracy, just with everything simply. It's even more powerful if you use it in addition to Brothers in Arms. So if you've gone with Brothers in Arms anyway, I can definitely recommend to you to get the improved vents as well, because they just improve absolutely everything and they're really awesome to have, especially on SPGs, tank destroyers and heavy tanks. Vents are really important, not as much on medium tanks and light tanks, but they help on any kind of tank, and it's an amazing piece of equipment. So that was the last piece of equipment that you can mount on the Super Pershing. However, there are other pieces of equipment that you can mount on other tanks, but not on the Super Pershing. Now, don't be afraid, I've only got 2 pieces of equipment left for you, and then you're done. So the first one is, let's see, IS4, the Cyclone filter, which will improve your engine durability 50%. Now, that's a good idea on tanks like the Tiger, for example, that have got real problems, or on all German tanks that have got problems with engine fires. I'm not sure about, like, you can't fit it on every tank. Like, for example, you can't fit it on the Super Pershing. But on tanks in which you find that they've got a big chance of engine fires, you should definitely check this out, because it decreases the chance of engine fires 50%. It's just like a wet ammo rack, just for the engine. And I can really recommend that for all German tanks, really all high-tier German tanks. I'm not sure if they can fit them, but if they can, you should definitely get this. For the last piece of equipment, I had to go onto the internet because yeah, I haven't got any tanks in my garage that can fit additional cruisers. Only a few mid-tier German tanks can fit additional cruisers, which are the Panzer III Ausführung A, the Panzer III, the Panzer IV, the Panzer III/4, the Panzer IV, the VK301H, the Panzer IV Schmalturm, the Stug 3, the Jagdpanzer IV, the Sturmpanzer II, and the Hummel. No other tanks in the game can fit additional cruisers. You may have noticed that when you are driving over swamps or through water, your tank will slow down and your traverse speed will get worse and so on too. So on that kind of soft terrain like swamps and water, your terrain resistance will be decreased by 10%. So that means the tank will be 10% easier to handle on that kind of ground, and 5% better on normal soil. So that's the additional cruisers for you. And yeah, that kind of more or less brings our tutorial to an end. There's just one last thing I want to point out to you, and that is that some pieces of equipment work even better in addition to crew skills. Like for example, the vertical stabilizer gets even more efficient combined with snapshot and smooth ride, and the wet ammo rack, you get even more benefit out of your wet ammo rack if you let your loader train safe storage. Your toolbox becomes even more effective in combination with repairs. Improved vents gets even more effective and efficient in combination with BIA. Yeah, so another thing is that coated optics and binocs work better if you couple them with recon and situational awareness. And yeah, that's all I think. And I hope I could help you out with this tutorial. I hope it gave you some idea what equipment to fit to what tank and if it's worthwhile or not. Of course, you still have to make your decision yourself if you want to fit equipment to your tanks, because it's really expensive. I would always recommend you to fit equipment to tanks, but you know, you won't sell in time, like for example your tier 10s or your premium tanks. On mid-tier tanks, I wouldn't really recommend it because it's really expensive, and you won't be keeping those tanks for that long. For example, if we look at the LOL tractor, I got improved vents because it only cost 50,000 credits. However, the light tractor is a tank that you get for free, and you can buy a toolbox, for example, 500,000 credits. That's just stupid, so don't do that. I wouldn't recommend that. But except that, equipment is really nice and can really improve your performance in the game. So think about adding equipment to your tanks, and I hope I could help you out. Thanks for watching anyway. Maybe subscribe to my channel, follow me on Facebook, and I hope I'll see you in my next videos. Bye bye.